Welcome to the Cup of Joe Wrestling Show.
Cup of Joe Wrestling Show?
With Joey Harris. A podcast for the wrestling fan on the go. So take your favorite beverage of choice and join Joey as he takes a look at some of the biggest shows on the WWE Network.
Welcome to the Cup of Joe Wrestling Show. I'm your host, Joey Harris, and we are broadcasting from makeshift studios in the shadow of South Central Virginia. Follow the show on Twitter and Blue Sky at Cup of Joe Pod. Email the show at cupofjoewrestlingshow@gmail.com. You can support the show at paypal.me/cupofjoepod. I am also on Cash App and Venmo at The Joey Harris. And of course, patreon.com/babykangaroomedia. For bonus episodes of the Cup of Joe Wrestling Show, the Joey Harris Super Show, the Green Room, Book Club Baristas, and so much more, just $5 a month for hours of extra content. And today, folks, we're doing something a little different as I sat down and had an interview with former Pro Wrestling Illustrated managing editor, podcast host, and all-around good guy, Bob Smith. It felt like this thing was snake bitten to begin with, folks. I had microphone problems. Bob couldn't hear me to begin with, got those straightened out. Get 90 seconds into the interview and I realize I'm not recording, but we got all that straightened out. I'm a little bit nervous at the beginning, but quickly felt more at ease with Bob. Bob's such a professional. And as well as that, I'm going to be on an episode of the Outdated Wrestling Hour coming up. So make sure that you give that a listen, as well as all of Bob's past episodes of the Outdated Wrestling Hour, as well as the Outdated Entertainment Hour, his other podcast where he discusses all things entertainment. So make sure that you give both of those a listen. And now sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation that I had with Bob Smith. We just realized I'm here with Bob Smith, former Pro Wrestling Illustrated managing editor, podcast host, and all-around good guy. And we realized that we were talking. I had forgotten to hit record. But Bob said some wonderful things about my podcast, and we were talking about it's really like I wanted to take not a deep dive into podcast, but a shallow dive. And you mentioned right before I realized I didn't hit record, I also listened to both of Jim Cornette's podcasts, and he can go 3 to 4 hours and seemingly not even breathe.
Yeah, it's amazing. But I have to take that in chunks. Now, I like your podcast because it is in chunks and it's easily digestible and you get a lot of history. You're doing a wonderful job. But it's like with Cornette and Brian Last, I have to 45 minutes. Then later in the day when I have the time, another 45 minutes. And sometimes, I'll be going to bed at night and I'll finish the podcast because it's like it just works that way for me sometimes. And I have nothing but respect for anybody who has done this any length of time. And by the way, Joey says he forgot to hit the record button or something went wrong. We just started record now. I was on a podcast. I co-hosted a podcast for a year before I started my own, and me and the host got into a wonderful conversation, and it was juicy and it was enlightening, and it had a lot of stuff that nobody ever heard before. And then we realized that the red recording sign was not on, and none of it was caught. So it does happen. Podcasting is an inexact science. I'm learning that more all the time.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And you think about it. I was thinking about the early days of television when nobody's recording anything. So that thing they were just broadcasting and it just went out and, they didn't think anything about saving that because the tapes were so expensive, which is, kind of hard for us now as wrestling fans because there's so much stuff that I would love to see that I've never seen, or maybe that you've seen. You're like, I remember this. And of course it's now gone forever.
Well, you know, it's ironic. Pedro Martinez, who ran the NWF in Cleveland and Buffalo, that was the first federation I ever saw. Mm-hmm. And when he retired from promoting, he started a videotape company called PM Videos. And I used to buy a mail order because I never saw the Sheik. I never saw the Sheik before 1980, and that's because I ordered his videotapes. I had some of the Detroit tapes on them and stuff like that. And, I mixed up what you could order. It was great. It was like a la carte. You could pick out whatever videos he had. He would dub them onto one tape, and you get it in the mail. I loved it. But here's the ironic part. His own federation, the NWF, which ran from about 70 to 74, I think. I could be off a year or two. like you said, they used to tape over those shows, and none of them survived. Not a minute of it. And that's what I grew up on, watching that show. And I'm like, oh man, what a loss that was. Because it was a really wild. I don't know how to put it. It was almost kind of like Detroit, but not quite. But it had that feel to it, and it was a studio show with Jack Reynolds, and it had its own flavor, and it was a really good flavor and a unique one. And I can't share it with anybody because there's no tape.
Right. I find all of that stuff interesting, especially for your podcast. I have been like, you'll make a recommendation like Bruiser Bedlam from the mid 80s when everybody's like, oh, they were no good. And you're like, no, go back and look at this stuff. And it's being uploaded and you can get it from YouTube and all of that. I'm like, I've got to add that to my list, my ever growing list of stuff I've just got to watch.
That's Dave Dynasty, who was tireless in trying to find old WWA tapes. That was the Federation for them. Have you checked them out? Have you seen any of them? And
very, very little. Like I'm the type of person, like I need to just shut the door, put my phone away, and just concentrate on it.
Now, here's the question: what little you've seen did you enjoy?
Yes. Absolutely.
See what I mean? This is my quest. This is my quest. I had the booker for the cream of that around, in the mid 80s, which was Dr. Jerry Graham Jr., Jerry Jaffe. And I'll tell you what, he knew what he was doing. He got the most out of what talent he had. He developed new talent. He brought Scott Steiner into the sport. I mean, it was a really, really different kind of a promotion. But if you noticed, like there's a couple of the tapes that they put out. One was called, I think, Wrestling's Bloodiest Battles or something.
Right.
And there was such heat in those arenas. I mean, real old school crowd riled up over the bad guys kind of heat. Nobody was getting that heat in 84-85 because that was the homogenized time in wrestling when WWE was softening up and the NWA was copying the WWE at that point. But these guys were doing it old school and it was working. I insist. That's why I fall off my chair every time I even think about it. Because you know what? At a time when a lot of the indies were drying up, they were still rocking and rolling, and they don't get enough credit for it. I think the reason was the geographic area they were in. It wasn't a very wide swath, where they were promoting.
Right.
But they were succeeding there. It was like wrestling's best kept secret. Not anymore. Not if I have anything to say about it.
Right.
I want people to watch it. I really do.
Right. So I usually have a script that I follow when it's just me talking. I've got like 5 bullet points here for you. So I know that you were with John Arezzi for about a year, and then that ended. You decided to go another direction and all that. And you're like, I'm really enjoying this. And you were up and doing the wrestling podcast. What'd you say, within a week?
Within 5 days.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I got fired, by the way.
Okay.
He fired me. To this minute, I don't understand why. It wasn't discussed. He never let on. He was upset about anything. I think he had a Christmas period where ratings went down or something. He wasn't happy with the ratings and just let me go. And you know what? I said, I enjoyed this too much. I always wanted to be on radio. I went to college for radio and I never did radio.
Right.
So I said, let me just try it. I had learned enough about how to put one together, and the more I did it, the more I liked it. And I still love the nuts and bolts of putting a podcast together. I love the editing. I love, buying music to work on on the show, everything, every little aspect of it. And I like the editing, and I'll, for an hour podcast, I'll labor over the thing for 4 hours if I have to, just to get it right. Because I still do it the old fashioned way, by ear.
Right.
I'm not doing any AI stuff. I don't care. It doesn't work. So I just, I don't have any animosity about anything. I ended up kicking some rather serious, inroads here in wrestling podcasting in the last 2 years, especially last year. The doors flung wide open. Jeez, I had NPR call me to do a guest appearance and things like that. How they chose me out of the 900 wrestling podcasters, I have no idea. But when I get a phone call like that, it kind of signals that I've got a decent show, and I'm really happy about that. So, I've got a really loyal listenership that I'm really grateful for, and I'm having a blast. And I'm seeing people I haven't seen in 35 years. That's the best part about it. Because, I was with PWI from 88 to 95. I haven't seen some of these people in ages, but I'm seeing Apter again, Craig Peters, a lot of my old friends from the old days. And if I'm not seeing them, I'm hearing from them on social media. Oh man, it's like a fountain of youth, man. It's great.
Well, I hear when you have them on as guests or talk about them, and my ears perk up because that's who I was reading back when I was getting PWI and the Wrestler and Inside Wrestling. But there's one person, I don't know if they fell off the face of the earth, I never hear anything about, and that's Eddie Ellner.
Eddie Ellner, you're right. He was a real guy. I just want to emphasize that.
Right.
He was a real guy, and he was every bit as acerbic in real life as he wrote.
Okay.
There's no act with him. It wasn't an act with Dan Shockett either. Those guys were just out there a little bit, and I think that's why people liked reading their columns. I don't know what happened to Eddie. That's a really good point you made.
The early days of when I got on the internet, because I didn't get on the internet till I went to college. I went to college in '96. This is the first time I had cable, by the way. That's the first time I could watch.
That's how stuff works.
Yeah. And so I'm getting on and I'm looking at, and someone said that he was like into yoga or running a yoga studio. And someone said, and I don't know what this was, is that he spread his grandmother's ashes all over Yankee Stadium. Like he got out and was running away from the police. And as she's doing it, that's the last I have ever heard anything about Eddie Ellner.
Really? I never even heard that.
Yeah.
Wow. I'll have to check with Bill after because I'm still very tight with Bill.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll have to see if he knows anything. Or Craig, I'm going to see Craig in March. So it's like, see what I mean? We're getting together.
Right.
Just for social engagements after all these decades. It's great. I mean, I don't know what to say. It was a dream job that I had to leave because I didn't quit. They didn't fire me. They moved.
Right. They moved from New York to Pennsylvania.
Right.
Yeah.
In the pre-internet era, you had to be in an office to have a job like that. And it was kind of, I refer to it as like a cosmic screwing. It's just they liked me and I liked them, but there was nothing I could do. And I had just bought property and I couldn't leave. And oh man, I'll never forget the day Stanley Weston walked in the office and said, "I'm selling," and I'm like, I don't believe it. I thought for sure he would sell to at least somebody in Manhattan, Manhattan Magazine Company. No, he sold to Kappa, which is primarily a crossword puzzle publisher in Pennsylvania. I couldn't go. Couldn't do it.
No, I understand that, especially if you just bought property. Yeah.
But then I took a job that I really didn't like, and then I took another job I didn't really like, and and I finally, I found a job that I really liked in another company that went out of business, and then I spent 17 years doing an entertainment magazine in Long Island, and I'm like, I might as well do an entertainment podcast because I had all the connections of people that I knew in this scene around here in entertainment, and I'm really enjoying the entertainment. It's called The Outdated. All my podcasts are outdated. This is The Outdated Entertainment Hour. And it's nice because I get to talk about just fun stuff that I like. Basically, that's it. But all of it with a nostalgic bent. Like we had Steve Gennarelli, the Stick to Wrestling podcast. We talked about toys.
Yeah. We
did a podcast on toys. And it was amazing that we both remembered kind of the same toys and stuff like that. I had Brian Solomon from his Set Up and Wrestle podcast. We did B movies, like drive-in films. I'm trying to do stuff that not everybody's kind of covering, that kind of thing.
Right.
And that's partially why I brought Joe Puccio on as my co-host on the Outdated Wrestling Hour. He's been on 2 episodes now, and I just wanted to show you it's the same thing you're doing in a way because you want your show to be unique. You want it to be different than everything else that's out there.
Right.
And I think we're achieving that. And what I'm really happy about is I'm bringing new voices that I'm discovering, like a Liam Savage or Anthony Pyrus or Joe Puccio or a few others that I've had on the show who really hadn't had a lot of exposure up to the point when I put them on the air. And people like them. And I love that. I think that's really awesome. So, and we had, some people that people did know, like Howard Baum, who hadn't done a podcast in a while, and people really went nuts for that show. So it's really cool to get varying points of view on old stuff, and I'm glad that there's some people who remember some old stuff at this point.
It's funny. I listened to Jim Cornette, and through that, I picked up Brian Solomon and John McAdam and Steve Gennarelli's podcast. And through John and Steve, I got to your podcast. And through your podcast, I've started listening to Wrestling Talk with Mayor McCall and the USWA Rewind with Gene Jackson.
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's a great show. That's a really good show. And I hooked up with the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Ray Russell runs that, and it's nice. It's giving it's definitely giving things a boost. I didn't know what to expect when I kind of latched on there, but it's been fruitful. I think it's really helping spread the word about the show. That's what we're all doing. Like at the beginning of the show, I do a promo for all the WrestleCopia show because we're just promoting each other.
Right.
Nothing more, nothing less. And I think it's a good way to go. Anything that helps get the word out in the kind of, I don't know, underground world of wrestling podcasting. Because, you're not going to see an ad for our shows or your show on TV or on radio or anything like that. We have to kind of get the word out organically. So anybody that helps get the word out, I really appreciate it.
Well, I looked as of this morning when my latest episode came out. I've been doing this 5 years now, and I just hit 250,000 downloads.
Wow!
This
Congratulations! That's
Thank
great.
you. Yeah, and to me, that is tremendous. I know everybody else, the bigger podcasts. I'm sure this is just a drop in the bucket to them, but to me, I'm like, you know what? I like what I'm doing, and I'm not making any money off of this. I actually do 2 podcasts. I do another show called The Joey Harris Show. I call it a show about life, where I just talk about basically everything else other than wrestling. Mm-hmm. This is the wrestling one, but I enjoy doing both of them. So yeah.
It's funny. I'm entirely self-produced even to this minute, and so the fact that I've never put out a podcast that didn't chart. Not any single episode has has failed to chart. Every one of them is charted. Some of them shockingly high, some of them a little bit disappointing. I don't care. I just to me this is a nice exclamation point on a charmed life. I really think I've had a charmed life. I've done a lot of cool stuff, and the fact that I'm able to kind of relive it and kind of share my glee over the fun I've had with other people. It's like a, I don't know, blessing, It's like, I don't know how to put it. Nobody has a perfect life. Nobody, life can be very hard for a lot of people. So if I can, this is going to sound really corny. If I can take people away from the chaos for 45 minutes a week, I'd love to do that, So,
sure.
So, and I know there's a lot of people nostalgic for the old school feel of professional wrestling. There's no question about that. Mm-hmm. I mean, you turn on Raw now on Netflix, and it's the most lavish production you can imagine. It's incredible, and I'm not putting them down. I actually am kind of in awe of what they've been putting out the last couple of years. But part of me yearns for the day of one big Klieg light over the ring, cigarette smoke in the air, and popcorn, and the $1 program and the chicken on a stick in my local armory. I mean, it's I loved that vibe back when I saw my first wrestling matches live. And it's hard to explain it, but when you explain it to somebody your own age, they get it. They understand it.
I went to my first wrestling show at the local high school. I'm 15, and the biggest star of the night is a guy who's just off of a small run in WCW, Rob Van Dam. Mm-hmm. This is 1993. Now I know that you saw him in 91,
right,
in Memphis, but he was just far and away above everybody else. Now you got a mix of guys that you had never heard of, but Bobby Fulton was on that show. Greg Valentine and Wahoo McDaniel fought each other and just chopped the hell out of each other right in front of me on the outside and all of that. But he was far and away, and I actually won dinner with him. We ate at the local Subway at the local Subway and all of that. So yeah,
that's great.
Good time.
Yeah, I still remember. I'm going to wax nostalgic here, but I remember getting in the closest seats we could to sit in the armory, and I was always in awe of their boots. Mm-hmm. It's just something simple how shiny their boots were, or some guys had really old leathery beat up boots. Like Baron Cicluna, I don't think ever bought a second pair of boots in his life. Right. But then you'd see a guy like I don't know, Davey O'Hannon, who had Irish green boots, and they always looked shiny and new. So I guess it depends on the guy, but I just was enthralled with the whole thing. It seemed bigger than life. When you're 15, 16, 17 years old, it always seems like a big deal, you know? And
Right.
again, I'm not putting down what they do now, but I really enjoyed it in the old days. And you could afford everything. You know, you could afford it. I remember they literally used to sell tickets at my local armory out of a cigar box and make the change out of the cigar box.
Right.
Now it's like I saw WrestleMania tickets on sale for $8,000 a piece. I
Oh, yeah.
I can't even. My brain explodes when I see how much tickets are these days. WWE is like a Taylor Swift concert now.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's
Yeah.
crazy. I mean, and you know, I would say that they're too expensive, but they sell out every show. So who am I to say it's too expensive? You know?
Right. Right. And I'm leaving. I went to WrestleMania last year in Philadelphia with a buddy of mine, and that city just came alive for that. There's
Yes.
so much stuff. So they had all of the things, all of the different promotions coming around and doing shows, and we're leaving night one, and everyone's leaving. I tell people that was the coldest I've ever volunteered. I paid to be that cold. It was just incredibly cold, but we're waiting to go down these steps, and this guy says, I got to leave. I've got another show I've got to go to at midnight. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Philadelphia was live, man. I was there. I went because they did a radio interview, and it was like,
Right.
it was live in Philly. And you know, I've probably nobody's complained, but I do consider right now Philly to be the wrestling capital in of the United States, because they're the most loyal fans. They go to everything. They'll go
Right.
to the 2300 Arena, or they'll go to WrestleMania, or they'll go to an indie card in high school, and they fill up with conventions. They have 6-7 conventions every year in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't think of another town as active in pro wrestling as Philly is. If somebody wants to correct me, I'd love to hear it. But for now, I think Philly's it.
Oh, I would totally agree with that. And yeah, no, they're going to make so much off of this WrestleMania in Las Vegas. I was there between Christmas and New Year's with my wife, and they were getting ready for it. Then you saw WrestleMania stuff everywhere, and we were 4 months away from it at that point.
Yeah. I mean, pardon the noise there.
No.
Yeah, it's just, I had a wonderful time the 2 days I was there. It's just, and I don't know if you know this, I was the original voice of ECW in their very first TV shows. Did you know?
Yeah.
I worked with Todd Gordon when it was just on a cable access Channel 7 out of Philly.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the co-host with Todd on these little shows in this little studio. And I really got to know Philadelphia back then. And I really enjoyed watching the young guys in the early ECW bloom, you know, and some of them became stars. You know, Sandman is one of them.
Right.
You know, it's like some of them faded away or quit or whatever, but it was nice to see the guys who did start out there make it. You know, Sandman was pretty big for a while, so
Sure.
it's a nice career he ended up doing. So I don't know what to say. I miss Philly too. I thought Philly was a great scene.
Absolutely. I was thinking, and I know from listening to your show that you got to the PWI through kind of a story you had done on Mike Tyson.
Well, yeah, kind of. Well, that helped. It helped a lot.
Right.
I mean, it was a wrestling magazine. They published KO magazine. They later published The Ring, Ring magazine. And it's 88, and I see a 2-line ad in the New York Times.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just two little lines. And it said, of course, back then they had 4 pages of editorial jobs. So it was another world. And it said, editor/writer wanted for Sports Entertainment Pub. And I went, Sports Entertainment, that's wrestling. It said, send Clip's resume to box something, RVC New York. I said, that's Rockville Center. That's PWI. I said, oh boy. So I put my I had a couple of award-winning sports pieces, one of them on Mike Tyson. So I sent my best stuff there, and I'll be darned if it wasn't 2 days before I got a phone call. And I'll be darned if by 5 days I had the job. And it was just, I think, assistant or associate editor in the beginning. Oh my gosh, was I lucky. I mean, At first of all, I was lucky to work in my hometown newspaper with Mike Tyson training right across the street. Right? I mean, come on. Did I step in it or what? And they had made me sports editor at the time when he was turning pro. I mean, everything, all the ducks were in the row for, I started stringing quotes for the Associated Press and people started to know who I was. And everything, Mike Tyson made my career. There's no question about it because I had access to him. And it was, our newspaper was literally directly across the street from the Catskill Boxing Club where he used to train with Cus D'Amato and Kevin Rooney. So I just stepped in it. I mean, it's like, and then a year and a half later, I'm with PWI. I mean, come on. I mean, it's just, I was a record store manager 2 years before I worked for PWI.
Right.
I managed a Record World store. It used to be a chain called Record World. I think they were in Virginia. I'm not sure. But I was an East Coast record chain. And, making big money, but when I had the opportunity to get a job, which is really what I wanted to do, I remember working for a third of the salary. I just walked away from all kinds of cash because I really wanted to be a newspaper. I really wanted to write, and it was the best move I ever made. I mean, we had to bite the bullet, but I'll tell you what, it was worth it in the long run because I was in publishing from 1981 till 2021.
What were you thinking when what was it, a year and a half later when Tyson gets knocked out by Douglas?
I remember I wasn't at that one. I was kind of in between things, or was it with PWI at that point? I'm not even sure.
That was
91. It was a year before. Okay. I saw it and I said, never would have happened if Cus was alive. I think he had gone through too many permutations with Kevin and later on with Don King and all this other stuff. And I just think his head wasn't right. And I think Cus D'Amato dying really blew a hole in his career. That's just my opinion on that.
I think you're right.
Because he respected Cus and Cus really worked him hard, but he knew why. And oh my gosh. I tell everybody, I think my greatest thrill in sports was just hanging out in the gym watching him do neck crunches. Mm-hmm. He's a beast, man. He was one of the most physical specimens I've ever seen, and steroid free. I insist. It was all steak and potatoes. He was a demon at working out, and when he was motivated to box, he wasn't accepting defeat at all. Mm-hmm. Now I know in the early part of his pro career, they gave him the Tomato of the Month club. Every month he was fighting somebody, and nobody ever heard of the people. But within 8 months, he was a national star, and started to fight better people like Michael Spinks and stuff like that. So he earned his keep, but I don't know. I just continue to feel if Cus had been around a little longer, like another 5 years, that Tyson would have been a champion for all those years. And it's just my opinion on that.
No, I think you're right. I think his life would have been totally different if Cus had been alive just a little longer. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I mean, Mike's a misunderstood person. I think underneath it all, and I know he had his troubles, but I think that deep down, he's a decent man and a good guy and a hard worker. And you couldn't deny his drive and determination, especially coming out of Brooklyn like he did. We had nothing, and to come up to Catskill and live in a house with Cus and the other guys, and it was just he worked his butt off. Even in high school, he was ready to rock and roll. So, he didn't make the Olympic team. I remember the people felt he kind of got jobbed off the Olympic team, and so they started to refer to him as Catskill's uncrowned Olympic champion, which really wasn't, kind of stretching it. But when he got in the ring with even some seasoned pros by his 20th fight or so, he was just demolishing people. He was just such a beast, something to watch. Absolutely.
And I don't know if you watched the Jake Paul fight at the end of last year.
I did watch it, and it's just depressing.
It was, but I maintained that Netflix did that so they could test out live sports because they had the NFL on Christmas Day, and then they have Raw every Monday now. So,
yeah. Well, Mike shouldn't have done it. I mean, he didn't get slammed. It was just, I think it just showed that it was a money grab, the whole thing.
Right.
It just was.
Sure.
It was just publicity, and it got a lot of eyeballs. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But times change and everybody gets old.
Absolutely. That is the truth. As they say, Father Time does no jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Like I say, I'm so old now that my just for men lasts just an hour. I can't keep the gray away. I'm trying, but
I'm with you on that. I went prematurely gray though. I started
looks good on you though. I think when I look gray, I look like Gabby Hayes because I have a beard and stuff. I'm trying to avoid that.
Yeah. All right. But Bob, I do want to be mindful of your time. We definitely have to do this again. You are always welcome on here.
I'll let the cat out of the bag. You're coming on my show soon. So,
sure.
And we're going to work on that pretty presently. But no, listen, I really admire what you're doing. You're making your mark out there. I really like I said on the other one, your show is a little bite-sized chunks, but they're chunks of filet mignon. I mean, it's shocking how enjoyable it is to me because, I've heard everything and it takes a lot to impress me now. And I spent most of this week listening to some of your back shows. And I'm like, everyone is like a mini history lesson, a lot of meat and potatoes. I think it's great. So congratulations on that. It really is.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate that. And next time I'll break format and we'll go longer, but I do want to thank you. But before I let you go ahead and plug any and everything that you have.
Here's the easy way. I've learned after 3 years the right way to promote it. Go to any browser and type in outdated wrestling or outdated entertainment, Bob Smith, bang. All the stations that we're on, all the apps that we're on will pop right up. It's the Outdated Entertainment Hour is our entertainment show, and the Outdated Wrestling Hour is our A show with Joe Puccio. And we're up to about 110 episodes in 3 years, which isn't bad. We're on most weeks, and if you do check us out, go through the catacombs. I don't Patreon my stuff. I just kind of leave it out there.
Right.
We've had some really interesting shows about some really odd topics, and I think you might enjoy. I've had people like Terry Sullivan and Dave Brzezinski on from Detroit, and if you really like the older stuff, I think we're a source that's pretty interesting. And there's a lot of other great nostalgia podcasts too, don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. But we're trying to take a kind of a different tack on things, and we hope you listen. We would love to have you hear us.
I have enjoyed it. I started listening last year right before WrestleMania and have stayed current, but I'm also going back and almost caught up completely. I'm almost listened to everything that you've done. So
I will say this. I'm embarrassed by the first show. The first show I did, I was, like I said, I had that vibe. I got to get a podcast out. And I listened back at it. I didn't have my mic technique down yet. I really wasn't 1,000% confident, because I'm stepping out on my own. I was thinking, who's going to listen to this? And it's a funny story. It's about a month later, and I was completely oblivious to podcast ratings. Mm-hmm. And I found a place to get them, the Apple podcast charts. And I'm looking, and I'm like, number 36. And I'm like, what? I was shocked because I had done 3 or 4 shows. I never even checked the ratings before.
Right.
And I was like, really? I mean, I'm right next to like this Dutch man Tell to my left, and on my right was like Ryback or something. I'm like, mm-hmm. What?
Yeah.
So I just want to thank all the old time PWI fans out there and the Wrestler and Inside Wrestling and all those magazines, because I think that's the horse that draws the cart. I think people remember the magazines. And we talk about the magazines a lot. And listen, I miss those mags just as much as everybody else does. I was buying those magazines when I was a full-grown adult, even before I got the job there. I don't know about you. Did you always read the magazines?
Oh yeah,
religiously.
As soon as I became a fan and then found the magazines, all the time. Just yeah. I worked at a grocery store, and the ones that didn't have that, right next door was a pharmacy, and they had the ones that the grocery store didn't have. So I was covered.
Yeah, every town has that one newsstand that you rely on for the wrestling money. That's right. And I miss those days. Oh man, do I miss those days. But things change. Time marches on. What can you do?
Yeah.
But you know what? I was happy to be there. I call myself the Martin Short of PWI because I replaced somebody on the staff. And
Right.
it's like, at least I got to be at the last part of what I call the glory years before they moved away. And, the GC London, Rockville Center era. And to have that little touch of history, I'm very, very happy. It's like, you never get a job like that. I've never had a job like it since, I'll tell you that much. I've had to work since then.
All right. Thank you so much, Bob. You can follow me on Facebook, Threads, and Instagram. I'm at the Joey Harris. If you like the show, please take a moment and leave a review on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, or your preferred podcast app. I would really appreciate it. It helps people to find the show. We're also on Spotify and YouTube. Just search for the Cup of Joe Wrestling Show, and don't forget to hit subscribe. Bob, thank you again, and thank you all for joining me. This is Joey saying so long from the heart of Virginia.
The Cup of Joe Wrestling Show is a production of Baby Kangaroo Media.